Well, it started about 4 years ago.
My name is John Thornton, and I've been making films about artists with the Philadelphia connection since 2007.
He had this crazy idea for a art project that just involved dancers and music and crazy costumes, and I thought he was crazy.
In June of 2017, I was invited by a young artist to see his show at the James Oliver Gallery. It was an installation in a dark room of huge photographs displayed on an array of giant glass screens. They would fade in and out and were accompanied by a haunting musical score.
It sounded like an explosion of ideas, and I wanted to be immersed in all of it.
I had never experienced anything like it.
My name is John Singletary, and I'm a photographer and multimedia artist working in Philadelphia. Recently, I've been collaborating with a group of incredibly talented people in creating a body of work called Anahata, a Sanskrit word which refers to the energy of the heart. It translates loosely into unstruck or unbroken, and also refers to the sound of the celestial realm. I'm a traditionalist in many ways. However, the effect of an installation is so different than an exhibit of prints. A print gives you a window into a world. With an installation, I get to create that world.
In thinking about Anahata, we have to consider both art and technology. Let's look at the technology first, which is truly cutting edge. Tim Alessi of LG USA and Robert Zone, who brought Anahata to Scarsdale, New York, talk about the OLED display panels.
OLED is the newest panel technology on the market for TV. It stands for Organic Light Emitting Diode, an emissive technology that makes its own light.
OLED is 5 years old in production. This is our 5th generation. The technology was actually invented by Eastman Kodak scientists, and it was sold to LG Electronics, all the patents and the intellectual property rights.
And it has the added benefit of being able to control each pixel individually, so you can turn it completely on or completely off. The artwork that John Singletary created really takes full advantage of the capabilities of OLED.
By putting this on a fantastic OLED emissive display, he's made it a much more attractive and much more compelling story.
Really nice, crisp images, no light leakage, beautiful colors, and a perfect black background.
The 5 months leading up to the show at James Oliver Gallery were an absolute crash course in areas I knew nothing about. I have to give immense credit to Yousef Mahmoud, who lent his invaluable skills as a digital technician and inventive problem solving to the show. It just couldn't have been pulled off without him.
So my role in this project as digital technician was to find a way we could take the images that John had created and implement them on the OLED arrays that would be at the final show. One of the major hurdles we ran into was synchronization of the images on the separate displays. We had the images running from 2 graphics cards installed in a computer tower for each array, and we eventually came up with the solution of using a patching software that would allow us to have each image synchronized onto each screen. This software also allowed us to have real-time visual effects that we could implement on the screens without having to render out each and every image.
I worked with 2 photographers, Andrey Kolyada and Justin Kuttner. Andrey is unquestionably the best photographic technician I have ever met. He's this brilliant, eccentric, mad scientist type in the studio. He and I have a wonderful sense of chemistry together. Justin was really the anchor in his groundedness, dependability, and sense of pragmatism.
What drew me to the project originally was so simple. It was being John's friend. He had said he was working on something and needed extra hands. My role in the project, building a studio, managing lights, managing triggers, and coordinating the time, the process is so easy to lose yourself in, and the hours go by. So I found myself really trying to keep us together and moving forward.
In building a studio, we settled on a property on West Walnut Lane in Germantown, nicknamed the Murder House, as it was the site in the 1920s of an especially gruesome murder. We created a black box studio by covering the floor and the walls with black velvet, so it was like shooting into a void. On the ceiling, we hung hundreds of feet of cabling, some fiber optic projectors, traditional photographic strobes on a complex radio trigger system, and introduced about 1,000 watts of industrial strength UV light in the space.
I think everyone involved in this project found themselves in unfamiliar territory. I'd always worked as a solo artist, and I know John took the large step from going from photographer to a director role, because there's so many times where I would have the camera shutter in my hand and I would be controlling the lights, and then he would have to come up and collaborate with the makeup artists and the fashion designers, and he had ideas and they had the real experience and they had to go back and forth, and it was a massively collaborative effort that I didn't see coming at the beginning.
Though made possible through technology, Anahata is most certainly a work of art. When I saw it at the James Oliver Gallery, it consisted of 5 separate images. Dance of Hades, Dryads, Clarice, From Dirt, and Providence.
A lot of times when people see the behind-the-scenes photographs, they wonder why the models' bodies and costumes are so vibrantly colored. The studio practice is quite unusual. I'm shooting with an extended spectrum camera, which can see into the ultraviolet as well as infrared spectrums. Having that intense, rich depth of color is very helpful in creating a dynamic black and white.
Now let's look at the aesthetic ideas and creative partners that made Anahata more than just a dazzling display of technology, but an inspiring work of art.
Finding the way to express my ideas emotionally, visually, and aesthetically was incredibly challenging. I started by surrounding myself with the most enthusiastic, talented group of people I could find and tried to cultivate a dynamic that made us collaborators in the truest sense of the word. Anahata began when I brought a few rough sketches over to my good friend David Markham-Gessner of Perry Felix Design. This process, it simply wouldn't have been possible without him. He was the primary set designer, a key creative partner, and masterfully directed the installation process.
Started working on this project with John 3 years ago when he presented me with a number of ideas he had for a shoot he wanted to do. That turned into helping him organize some of the conceptual themes, helping him build a studio to produce that work and overcome some of the technical challenges. I've gotten to see the synthesis of a lot of my life skills and experience through this work.
We shot Anahata over a 2-year period in 9 or 10 sessions. The average length of a shoot was 16 hours. This required a tremendous amount of dedication from the dancers and the crew of 10 to 15 people.
It was always a lot of long nights, and I love that. That's always what's been most compelling about this work, is that there's been a consistent energy from the beginning, a vision, a sense of magic that even if it were unclear at the time when it was produced, it was obvious what we were working towards.
At times the shoots were exhausting, messy, even painful.
I don't want to talk about it. This is so painful.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
At best, having a group of people together in flow state, functioning as a single entity, totally in the moment, was exhilarating and electric. It was magic. Costume design, I worked with Keila McCormick and Rebecca Kanak, who both made wonderful contributions to the project before I met Cait Stewart.
I'm Cait. I'm the makeup artist and costume designer for the project. My background is actually in oil painting, but that evolved into body painting and then eventually went into costume design, which I'm self-taught in. The process will always start out with a simple idea, something that John wants to portray, whether it's like a word or a specific vision. We'll bounce it off each other. I'll come up with some designs and sketches, and then after the sketches have been worked out, I think about materials, and it all gets constructed. I will make them. As I became more involved with the project, my aesthetic and John's aesthetic seemed to kind of mesh together. Visually speaking, we like to draw on nature. We're very interested in the way things move and the way that light bounces off on surfaces and on people.
Most of the models are dancers, many studying at the University of the Arts and working with local dance companies. Through auditioning, I realized the qualities I was looking for didn't lie in a particular skill set, but rather with a certain spark and adventurousness. I had a very clear sense of narrative and went into rehearsals with developed sketches indicating how I wanted the dancers to move, to relate to one another emotionally, to tell a story. However, I could never call myself a choreographer. This is where Megan Hannon became an extremely valuable part of the process. She's a very talented dancer with a true gift and passion for choreography. Nate Carter is primarily a self-taught dancer coming out of the hip-hop tradition. He's developed this incredibly unique style. The guy just moves like a force of nature. Photographs come into my mind fully formed at completely unpredictable times. I'm a strong believer in working from a place of heart and instinct. When something strikes me that carries a sense of truth, I don't need to know what it's about intellectually in the beginning. Clarice is a perfect example. She's an actual person that I met by chance. We shared a very impactful conversation, and I never saw her again. A few months later, the photograph that was yet to be made just hit me, and I knew it had to exist as something tangible. Principal dancer Keila Perez-Vega has really been an anchor and a cornerstone in making this project work.
I was one of the dancers, and John and I met countless of times before getting into shoot to build a framework of movement to work off of during the shoot.
One of the worst mistakes is to overdirect, to stifle talent and deny a model the space to truly shine in their own way.
John gave the dancers and myself permission to move within the framework, to make up my own movement or suggest movement. We would come at noon to get painted, to get dressed, but sometimes shooting didn't happen till 7 p.m. There were movements that we spent maybe 2 hours on trying to find the perfect shot. It takes time to make something beautiful and takes time to perfect your craft, and I was really intrigued that John was trying to capture these moments of stillness between people. The layering of images, the way John layers them, it's a dance in itself, and as a dancer I could really appreciate that because dance isn't just one thing, it's a string of ideas.
The first member of the cast is Amber Malmstad, who would become both a principal dancer and an integral part of the project.
I think all artists feed off each other. I had no experience with photography before I started talking to John, and John had never talked to a dancer before. So when you add those two elements together, the knowledge of dance, the knowledge of photography, you just get something amazing. We would always talk about the story or the idea. Throughout the entire shoot, we would keep going back to that original concept and saying, how does this relate? What does it look like for the viewer? And we would incorporate all of these things. I loved performing in all of these pieces because each one has a different story. Whatever character you make up in your head is what you're performing, and it's very fun to do that.
I'm very hesitant to impose my narratives on the viewer. I want the work to be universal and open enough for anyone to find their own life experiences and stories in the imagery.
I relate to dryads the most because I believe people have multiple masks that they wear throughout their life, and it also just reminds me of fairies, and I love to walk around through life like a fairy and happy and seeing the positive in everything. I love to ask other people what the work is about.
In my mind, it's sort of about relationships. You start out in a relationship and you're sort of vying for control, who's doing what, who's the prominent person. Everybody wants to be important to the other person. And you go through all of that and you come out maybe battered and bruised and hurt, but you come out where you're together and you realize that the only way that you can get through this relationship is to be together and to be a team and to be one. So that from there on, it looks to me like you're working together as one entity, as a couple, and then the end comes to, a very nice conclusion.
Well, it's really funny because when we were talking about the concept for this work, we actually did have a storyline, and it's individual. Like, for me, I was thinking about my own relationships, so I was thinking how I would respond to different scenarios, different points in a life.
A lot of the work has been exploring relationships with people. And the costumes are also meant to reflect a relationship. They complement each other, but they also contrast with each other.
Mm-hmm. So what led John to the creation of Anahata? His mother is an art historian, so he was very aware of photography as art. But his first love was music.
I played all the time, I wrote obsessively, and released 3 albums of instrumental, experimental music with my recording project, La Brea. I was really influenced by a lot of the stuff coming out of Montreal at the time, bands like Godspeed You Black Emperor, Do Make Say Think, Fly Pan Am.
John found himself very inspired by photographs taken by these avant-garde musicians.
Like the weird, apocalyptic, black and white images shot by some of the members of Godspeed, and the work Tim Rutilli of the Chicago band Red Red Meat was doing with Polaroid. I took my first photography course at Philadelphia Community College. I fell completely in love.
He then studied at the University of the Arts, which turned out to be the perfect hunting ground for him to find talented collaborators. A turning point came when he met a terrific woodworker and photographer named Richard Kagan.
When I met Richard, I just released my last album with La Brea, didn't have a clear direction, and when Richard took me under his wing as his assistant, it was pivotal. I felt an immediate, deep resonance with his work and the precision and beauty in his printing. I was aware that I was with someone that had truly dedicated his life to art and had become a master in his own right. The grace and integrity with which he handles his life is really a model to emulate.
John started out as a fairly traditional photographer, capturing images from the real world. But things changed in 2013 when he began to set up and direct surreal tableaus and then photograph them.
It's the difference between searching for traces of yourself in the world around you and creating an image that is truly a reflection of your own internal consciousness.
This Eroticism and Emptiness series was the precursor to Dance of Hades, the beginning of Anahata. People are mistaken if they believe that art and science are wholly separate realms. Since Leonardo da Vinci, the two have often been linked, with artists using new technology in their aesthetic pursuits. In the hands of a pioneering artist like John Singletary, digital imaging technology is a very powerful tool.
This is pretty groundbreaking type stuff.
He's blazing the trail. He's showing the world how to do this.
I don't see why this couldn't be just the tip of the iceberg.
I believe John will keep pushing the boundaries of his artistic expression, and I asked him about his future plans.
I see the series progressing and moving into more actually cinematic territory, exploring music, sound, movement, lighting design, and the design of the space itself.
John has many talents as an artist. The greatest may be his ability to enlist highly creative people who bring their own gifts to his cause.
I truly have an incredible amount of gratitude for everyone that worked with me on this project and believed in this vision.
It has been one of the most rewarding artistic and production experiences I've ever had.
Really exciting about this for me is that I can see my visions in a different medium that I wouldn't normally.
Working on this project with John and the team is exhausting. The most exhausting endeavor I've ever taken on. Because I want to be focused and I want to give this everything I have. And I know the rest of the team felt that way.
We collectively brought into existence something that is far more important and significant than our own individual contributions.
There were trials that we had to overcome, but for everything that we went through, there was never a lack of imagination.
It's as if John had a dream and then he woke up and said, I want to reproduce this vision.
It's beautiful to see all of our hard work put in one room and to see other people enjoying it.
I'm really proud to be part of this project. I'm excited for the future of this work, anywhere it may go.
You'll soon be able to see Anahata at the Delaware Center for the Contemporary Arts in Wilmington.
I can't wait to see more.